Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me again. Practice this week, if you looked at the invitation, is about ankle mobility. And I really have to thank Marty for that because last week when you came on joined the meeting, I could see in the background there and I could see you kind of maneuvering your ankles. And I thought, that would be a good theme for one of our practices. So theme for today is ankle mobility. And not only that ankles are, that place way down there. Sure, we'd like them to work good, but so what? Maybe sometimes they don't. Exploring the interconnectedness of ankle mobility and movements in the rest of your body. In order to begin that, it'd be good to have a couple pieces of knowledge in hand about range of motion of the ankle and how it interacts with your knee. So if you'll just bear with me for a moment, I'm going to move my iPad so that I can have it at ground level and you can see my ankles, my feet on the ground. There we go. So ankles, when we think about ankles, we think about these two little sticky out parts right here. And actually there's a better term for those sticky out parts. They're called malleoli. Malleoli are the terminus, the end of, on the inside, the end of the tibia, and on the outside, the end of the fibula. And they're connected with ligaments and connective tissue, but they have a kind of an interesting relationship how they sit on the bone below them. The bone below them, talus bone, is actually kind of pie-shaped, so that it's wider towards your toes than it is towards your heels, so that when your ankle flexes, those malleoli, they move away from each other. They come away from each other. And when your leg straightens the other way, they come closer together. They move apart. When you go forward, they come back closer together. There's two reasons for that. One is that little bit of sliding, that mobility, is a shock absorber. And the other thing is that when they move away from each other like that, it loads the connective tissues with kinetic energy so that there's this kind of springing back action when you release from that forward flexion. So that's one element. And the other element is relationship to your knee, ankle and knee. So perhaps you've been in a yoga class. Yoga teachers said, we're headed for a standing pose, but don't let your knee come forward of your heel. Crops will fail. Children will do poorly in school. Well, turns out that is pretty much biomechanical nonsense. That knee was made to come forward of your ankle, come forward quite a ways. In fact, look out on one of my textbooks here. There's actually 160 degrees of flexion available here. So 90, and then it would be more and more and more and more. So the idea is that knee needs to come forward of your ankle in order to get that optimal mobility in your ankle. And that's an important element. So with that knowledge in hand, let's just do something together here. Let's mobilize our ankles, and you can perhaps see in your own body how those sticky out parts, the malleoli, perhaps when you bend your knee, and kind of lunge forward, how they come away from each other. And when you straighten your leg, how they come back. Let's just warm up ankles one at a time by doing that. So knee coming forward, malleoli, sliding forward on the talus, and then knee straightening, malleoli coming back. And we'll do the other foot. Just a little warm up for the ankles here. And noticing how knee has to come way forward of the heel and the ankle in order to get that optimal range of motion, get that shock absorbing action, and to get that tissues loaded with kinetic energy so they can kind of spring back. Spring back. Yeah. We're here in the middle of winter, aren't we? Pretty darn cold. Thinking about spring. So we have an expression in our language for someone who is lively and energetic. Yeah, we say they have a spring in their step. So we're going to practice putting a spring in our step today. Spring in your step. So warmed up the malleoli. And now standing with both feet together, just taking one foot behind you so that top of the toes, toenails rest on the floor, and then circling your ankle around so that you go from toenails on the floor to pads of the toes on the floor, and going in both directions. And noticing how this mobilizes not only your ankle, but some of the toe joints, knee and hip as well. Going in both directions. And then we'll do the other foot. So it's got to come back behind you just a little bit in order to get onto the top of your toes. And then roll back onto the pads of your toes. That's probably enough of that little bit of a warm up. Let's go to the thing we do very often to begin our practice, and that is with hands on hips. On an exhale, just lifting your heels maybe an inch or two, beginning to load those joints and the ankles and the feet in that range of motion we want to encourage. Exhale, lifting your heels. Inhale, coming back down. And let's add our arm sweep to that as well. So then on an exhale, heels come up, arms sweep up. Inhale, everything comes down. Just warming up whole body as well as ankles, muscles of the lower leg, muscles that support your arches. And next time you're down, just pause. And there, we'll go right into some sun salutations that include dog pose. Let's head that way. On an exhale, sweeping up. Inhale, hold. Little bit of an exhale, lifting all the way upside down. Inhale. We'll come to hands and knees. Hands come forward, curling your toes under. Let's come up to downward facing dog. It's important to have heels off the floor, knees bent. And let's just pump our heels a few times. The advantage here is you can look back and you can see how those malleoli move when you load your ankle joint, heel coming down towards the floor, And when you release that, heel coming up towards your hands. And then we'll just exhale, hands and knees. Inhale, forward fold. And sweep it all the way up, exhale. Arms to the side. Inhale. Couple more of those. So it's exhale, sweeping up. Inhale, folding. Bit of a lift, exhale. All the way upside down. Inhale. Hands and knees and downward facing dog. Yeah. And you can pump your heels a little bit again here. Getting some of that movement in the ankles. Just making sure that heels are off the floor, knees are bent. Yeah, knees are bent, remember, because that facilitates more of that flexion in your ankle. Hands and knees, stepping forward, forward, fold, full deep inhale, all the way up, exhale. Arms. So just gotta check my notes quickly here to make sure I'm headed in the right direction. Yeah, sure enough. Let's take that wide stride with toes pointed out slightly, and then with hands on hips, and bringing a little bit more weight to your forefoot than there is in the heel. And noticing how that almost spontaneously softens your knees, allows you to bend. It's going to allow them to come forward to get that optimal range of motion in your ankles. So on an exhale, hips come back. Knees bend, hips bend, ankles bend, all the way down. Inhale, coming back up. Up and down like that. Bringing your awareness today to the movement, left side, right side. Moving pretty much the same on both sides, or is one side moving a little bit different? Yeah, don't know about you, but in my body today, left side, for some reason, it's a little tighter. Don't know where that exactly is. I don't think it's in my ankle. It could be in the hip, could be in the knee, or it could be in the ankle that's affecting knee and hip. Let's pause next time you're down in that squatting position, bringing hands to heart. And then lifting the heels of both feet just a couple inches in order to strengthen muscles that support your arches, support that talus bone that moves the malleoli. Let's slowly descend both heels to the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Contact. Inhale, coming back up. And let's just go up and down a couple more times with hands off of your body. Hands kind of out in a tray position. And noticing internally, left side, right side, ankles, knees, and hips, do they both move equally with the same vitality and fluidity, ease, or is one side a little different than the other? Not that you got to fix it or change it. Just taking a couple more minutes to mobilize and strengthen everything here. And then when we come up, stepping your feet together. So remember, way back in the beginning, I had my iPad on the floor. You could see how malleoli separated when your ankle flexed forward. Head for chair pose. Of course, you won't be able to look at your ankles. In fact, you don't really want to, but see if you can visualize as you exhale and bend at hips, knees, and ankles. See if you can visualize malleoli spreading away, sliding forward on the talons. And then as you come back up, how they slide back towards your heel, come closer together. Exhale, bending. Inhale, straightening. Next time we're in that chair position, pause there. And then inhale, reaching arms straight forward. Exhale, arms up overhead, coming all the way up. Arms to the side. So it's exhale, bending. Inhale, arms straight forward. Exhale, coming all the way up. Yeah. So another really interesting connection between ankles and knees and hips is this idea of having a little bit more weight in the forefoot than there is in the heel. So you might say, well, we've heard that before. It's kind of a theory, so what? Let's try it with a lot of weight in your heels rather than weight in the forefoot. So getting ready for chair pose, standing here, bringing a lot of weight in the heels, malleoli, sliding all the way back. In fact, even lifting your toes a bit. And then with hands on hips, we'll head for chair pose. Bending at hips, knees, and ankles. Yeah. Ain't happening, is it? And what happened to your ankles? Toes lifted. Ankles are not free to move, are they? Yeah, so a little bit more weight in the forefoot, more weight in the forefoot than there is in the heel, is going to free up those ankles. Exhale, coming up, down. Inhale, coming back up. So there are a lot of reasons for that. Weight in the heels pretty much locks up all of the connective tissue from hips on down to ankles. So that's why I'm a really strong advocate of in standing poses, a little bit more weight in the forefoot than there is in the heel. Let's head for the floor by way of a sun salutation. Exhale, sweeping up. Inhale, fold. And here we can flex ankles again. If you take your seat down towards the floor, a little bit of a squat here. Let your knees come forward. You can see ankles, malleoli moving, coming back up. Inhale, upside down. Then we'll head for hands and knees and downward facing dog. And I'll let you decide. Maybe a good opportunity again to pump those heels a few times. Pump each one separately and then maybe even pump both of them together. Yeah, training our ankles to put a little bit of spring in your step. And then coming on down to hands and knees and coming seated. So you may have noticed that I'm wearing shorts today. Very particular reason for that, because we're going to do that shin massage one more time. But before I go there, clear up a little bit of terminology here. So here I am with my heels on the floor and my ankles at about a 90-degree angle. So when I take my toes towards the floor, that's called plantar flexion. And when I bring my toes towards my knees, that's called dorsiflexion. So plantar flexion, dorsiflexion. Let's just do that both feet together a few times, sitting here like this and noticing how each side moves. Maybe one side moves a little bit freer than the other, and maybe they're pretty much the same. For me today, they're pretty much the same. So starting with your non-dominant leg, we're going to do that shin massage. And shin massage is not massaging over the shin bone. It's massaging on the lateral side, the outside of your shin bone. So here's my shin bone, and I'm going to feel my way right over off the edge of it to the outside. There's a nice fat muscle there. And so I'm going to take my thumbs over that muscle, my fingers behind my calf, and I'm just going to squeeze and push my thumbs down that muscle that's on the outside of my shin bone. And at the same time, I'm going to plantar flex and dorsiflex. Plantar flex and dorsiflex. And it's not uncommon for a lot of people that there's a little bit of tenderness in that muscle, a little bit of soreness. If you hit one of those spots where it's a little tender, or maybe it just feels like there's a little bump, a little knot in there somewhere, just pausing with some pressure on that area and plantar flex, dorsiflex a few times. So we spend another few seconds here, maybe 10, 15 seconds, working your thumbs down that muscle that's on the outside of your shin bone. Plantar flexing, dorsiflexing, finding a spot if there is one to give it a little bit more attention. And then we'll check in left side, right side. Yeah, so both feet together and dorsiflexing, plantar flexing again. Yeah, so the ankle, the leg we just worked with, does that ankle flex a little bit easier in both directions? Wouldn't be surprised. Let's do the other side. So that first side was non-dominant side, but if I forgot to mention that or you got mixed up, not to worry. Just going to the other side. So again, here's my shin bone on the inside here. I'm going to the outside of that shin bone with my thumbs and just massaging quite a bit of pressure. Maybe you can see that under my thumbnails, it's white. Yeah, I'm squeezing quite a bit there. And while I'm doing that, I'm plantar flexing, dorsiflexing. And there's a little bit of a knot right there. I'm just going to hold that pressure with my thumbs and work on that tender, knotted up area. Just finish off with a few long, deep, smooth pushes down my leg here. And then we'll check in again, both sides. Yeah. Legs feel a little bit more lively. So one more best practice before we head for another yoga pose. And that would be coming onto your back. Drawing your left leg in, and then hands behind the left thigh. And dorsiflexing that left foot, bringing toes towards your knee, and then on an inhale, taking that foot up towards the ceiling. And then it's plantar flex, toes pointing, lead the way down. So remember, we've done this before, and I've used that musical term crescendo to describe the movement of your ankle. Musical crescendo is a note or musical phrase that gets greater in volume, intensity, during the duration of the note or the phrase. So same thing here, plantar flexing, pointing, crescendo all the way down, and then dorsiflexing, heel leading the way up, crescendo all the way up. Pausing here before you do the next flexion and feeling in your leg what muscles move as you dorsiflex, plantar flex. So we already know that there's a direct connection with lower leg. What about upper leg? What about quads and hamstrings? Do they change when you flex? Let's go the other way. Plantar flexion, toes lead the way up. Dorsiflexion, heel leads the way down. Just one more of those. Plantar flexing, going up. Dorsiflexing, heel leads the way down. Crescendo all the way through to the end. And then stretching that leg out. Checking in left side, right side. So we already know there's a direct connection between muscles of the lower leg, flexion of your ankle. Perhaps you notice there's a connection with muscles in the thigh as well. Let's go right away to the other side. So drawing that leg in, hands behind your thigh, and then it's toes towards your knee, and crescendo that up towards the ceiling, and then it's toes towards the ceiling. And noticing in that area under your hands don't have to pull on that thigh. They're just there to give it some support, some direction. When ankle flexes, does that affect muscles in your thigh, hamstrings, and or quadriceps? Last one, let's plantar flex up, toes coming out. We didn't do this on the other side, but it's okay to be unilateral occasionally. Drawing circles on the ceiling with your big toe and noticing muscles in your thigh under your hand. As you make that ankle circle, drawing a circle on the ceiling with your big toe. The muscles in the thigh respond to that movement. Let's take that leg on down. Rolling to one side, coming up on hands and knees, and headed for downward facing dog. Little dog pose. Perhaps noticing do heels spontaneously, a little bit more easily come closer to the floor. Even though heels are still off the floor, knees are bent a bit. Let's come to hands and knees. And then stepping forward with your right foot coming up between your hands and extending that left leg out behind you, the runner's lunge. Back leg, toes pointing more or less straight forward, heels off the ground. And front leg is bent, we'll come up, 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 up to that high lunge position. Hands on hips, and then on an exhale, bending that front knee. And inhale, coming back up. Up and down a few times like that. Yeah. It's pretty hard to look at your ankles and see those malleoli sliding, gliding, putting a spring in your step, but perhaps you can visualize it. It's a little bit hard to actually feel it. Bending, they slide forward, straightening, they slide back. Just hold that next bent knee position. On an inhale, bring arms straight forward. Exhale, arms up overhead. Inhale, sweeping hands to the floor, all the way to the floor. Coming to hands and knees in, downward facing dog. Yeah. And your dog checking in left side, right side. Kind of feel like you got two dogs in your body, long dog, short dog. And checking in with those ankles too. Ankles flexed a little differently. One feel a little bit freer, lighter, easier. Let's do the other side. Hands and knees. Stepping forward with the other foot. Coming up on to both feet, both legs straight. Back foot, toes more or less pointing straight forward. And then on an exhale, bending that front knee. Inhale, coming back up. Up and down a few times. Remember when you were on your back a few moments ago? We were flexing and pointing. Plantar flexing, dorsiflexing. Direct connection with muscles of the lower leg, perhaps muscles of the thigh as well. Let's hold that next bent knee position. On an inhale, reaching arms straight forward. Exhale, arms up overhead. Sweeping down to the floor. Hands and knees downward facing dog. Yeah. Checking in left and right again. Dog more or less even, kind of is in my body today. Let's come on down to hands and knees. And then earlier I mentioned to some of you it would be handy to have a yoga block. And this would be the point in time to grab that yoga block. Unfortunately, mine is way up there, so I'm going to skip the yoga block today. Let's just step forward, forward, full deep inhale, exhale, sweeping all the way up. Arms to the side. So if you have that yoga block or couch pillow, something, putting it on the floor in front of you, taking a wide stride with toes more or less pointed straight forward this time. And on an exhale, tipping at your hips, hinging at your hips, bringing torso straight forward, coming down about parallel to the floor. And again, with a little bit more weight in the forefoot than there is in the heel. And this would be the time, if you think you need to bring hands to the floor or to the block. And then lifting both heels up off the floor and then setting them back down. So if you've ever ridden in an airplane, I think most of us have, perhaps many, many times. Airplane takes off, and the pilot tries to take off such that landing gear wheels, both wheels under the wings, leave the ground at the same time. And then when he comes in for a landing, he wants both of those wheels to touch down at the same time. See if you can imagine there's landing gear on your heels. You want those landing gear to leave the ground at the same time. And you want them to come back down, touch down at the same time. Yeah. So activating particular muscles in order to accomplish this smooth takeoff and landing. Let's stay down when we land this time, and then bring in hands to hips. So far, we've moved pretty much in that front to back sagittal plane. Now we're going to move in side to side coronal plane. So exhale, bending one knee, shifting your weight over, and inhale, center, coming over to the other side. Yeah, and here's a good opportunity again to look at ankles, look at knees, where knees and ankles are in relationship to each other. And pretty much debunking that idea that knees cannot be in front of heel or arch or toes. They certainly can. That's where they need to be in order to cultivate a spring in your step. Come and center, and then on exhale, come on up. Let's just stay right here with feet wide. Maybe adjusting them in just a little bit and turning right toes in, left toes out. Exhale, bending that front knee. Inhale, coming back up. Next time that front knee, left knee is in the bent position, pause there. And you can kind of tell without looking how the weight is distributed in that front foot, where the knee is. And this time we don't want the knee way out over your toes. And we don't want it way back behind your heel either. See if you can tell internally without looking by how the weight falls in that front foot. Yep, there, for me, it's right about there. Knee over center of the foot. On an exhale, tipping at your hips. Bring it forward to thigh. Yeah. So that's ankle in the front foot. What about that back foot, right foot? In order to get some spring in that step back there, let's take the thigh of that back leg and rotate it such that that back knee, right knee, kind of rotates towards the floor. And perhaps you notice when you do that, outside edge of that back heel wants to kind of lift off the floor. So see if you can find the interface. Knee rotating in at the same time, outside edge of the heel reaching down for the floor. And then it's that upper arm reaching straight forward. Coming up in an angle with back leg. Just a couple breaths here. From fingertips to outside edge of that back heel. Nice straight long line. How about bringing your arm in first and then coming up? Going right away to the other side. So left toes turn in. Right toes turn out. Exhale, bending. Inhale, straightening. So same thing on this side. That front leg. We're going to look to land the knee somewhere over the arch of your foot, but without looking. See if you can tell by how the weight is distributed, how those malleoli might be positioned. So that knee is over arch of the foot. For me, it's right about there, finding that spot. And then it's tipping at your hips, bringing forearm to thigh. Now activating that back ankle, rotating your thigh so that knee rotates towards the floor. Finding that interface with outside edge of your back heel, knee rotating in, yes. Outside edge of the heel, seeking the floor, yes. Arms sweeping up. Nice long line. Fingertips, outside edge of the back heel. Couple breaths here. And then it's just arm to hip, coming all the way up, stepping your feet together. Checking my notes one more time. I think we're right on time here. Let's see. Let's do a couple of those sun salutations, but we'll make them really the full athletic form this time that include the lunge. Yeah, so we'll add everything. Let's exhale, sweeping up. Inhale, fold. Beautiful lift, exhale. Hands and knees, inhale. Downward facing dog. All dog pose. And then it's hands and knees. One foot stepping forward between your hands. And we'll just come right up to that high lunge pose. And then exhale, sweeping on down. Finding hands and knees. Coming back to downward facing dog. Let's just pause here for a moment and notice how ankles are flexed, whether they're a little bit freer to move than they were way back when we started. Hopefully that's the case. Let's do the other side lunge. So hands and knees first, and then other foot stepping forward, coming up to that lunge pose. Couple breaths here. And then sweeping back on down, coming down to hands and knees. Pausing here for a moment. Let's take our hands forward and we'll do one kneeling plank. Kneeling plank, lowering yourself down, and then just pushing right back up. And we'll stay here on hands and knees, kind of standing on your knees. So we've done an awful lot of work in ankles to bring spring to your step by flexing ankles like this. Yeah, lots of dorsiflexion, not a whole lot of plantar flexion. So toes pointed straight out behind you. Now, tops of the feet on the ground, plantar flexion. So with tops of the feet pushing into the ground, bringing your fists to your lower back, and then just bringing your hips forward just a bit. Yep, kind of shaking hands with Ustrasana, camel pose, but we're not here for the back bend today. We're here for plantar flexion of the feet. Yeah, so just a couple breaths here, top of the feet pushing down. And then releasing your hands, bringing your hips back, coming to hands and knees. So having done some of that, let's head for bridge pose. You guessed it, bridge pose with a particular awareness, emphasis on ankles. So this time when you come down onto your back, with feet flat on the floor and knees bent, traditional way to start bridge pose. Maybe starting with heels a little bit closer to your seat. not tucked right up against it, but oh, maybe about one hand length away from heels to seat. And then we'll leave ankles out of the picture to begin with. We'll just tip your hips such that lower back contacts the floor. And then continue that movement, lifting first pelvis, and then low back, thoracic spine, coming all the way up, rolling up, and then rolling back down. Articulating vertebra one at a time such that sacrum back of the pelvis touches the ground last. Oh, there you go, all the way down. One more of those, just rolling up like that. Pelvis tipping, sacrum lifting, lumbar, thoracic coming on up. And then all the way back down. So one more time coming up like that, and then we'll add something special for the ankles. Making sure those feet are in a little bit closer than you would normally have. And heading for bridge pose again by tipping your hips, lifting your pelvis, low back, thoracic spine, pausing with hips up in the air. And then lifting your heels. Heels coming up, lifting pelvis a little bit higher into the sky, keeping your pelvis up just that high as you descend your heels down towards the floor. Heels now reaching for the floor, pelvis stays up high. Oh. And then one vertebra at a time, rolling back, on, down, all the way down. Drawing knees into your chest. Little bit of release for lower back. Rocking in and out a couple times. So while we're here on our back, bringing both feet to the floor and then crossing right ankle over left thigh. And that right knee is going to try to rotate out away from my chin, but my right hand is going to hold behind it and try to hold it back. So knee is going to try to rotate out. Arm is going to resist it, holding it back. And then plantar flex, dorsiflex. Plantar flex, dorsiflex. Let's draw that whole leg in by taking your left hand behind the left thigh and drawing things in a bit. Plantar flex, dorsiflex. So we've already established pretty direct connection between muscles, tissues of the lower leg, and movement of the ankle. Perhaps you've felt a connection between thigh muscles, quads, and hamstrings. And perhaps here you can feel a connection between deep hip muscles and flexing of the ankle, plantar flex, dorsiflex. So knee is pulling away, hand is pulling it back in, drawing that in towards your chest. So maybe you feel movement of tissues in your hip. No need to overdo it. Let's bring both feet to the floor. And check in left side, right side. One side we just work with feels a little bit more enlivened. The other side maybe a little more dormant. Let's wake up that other side. So crossing left ankle over right thigh. Left knee wants to draw away from my chin. Left hand is going to resist it, hold it back. Reason for that is we want to activate deep hip muscle as we draw everything in and plantar flex, dorsiflex. Flexing your ankle as you draw everything in. Knees still trying to pull away, hands still trying to hold it back. Perhaps feeling in that deep hip, a movement of the ankle. Spring in your step is related not only to what goes on way down there by your foot, but what goes on in lower leg, thigh, even in deep hip. And then bringing that on down, drawing your knees in towards your chest, and rolling over onto your left side with knees tucked in, kind of like you were going to sleep on your left side. And the first thing is to extend that top leg, right leg, straight out away from you. And then open your torso back towards the ceiling, reaching out with your right hand. You guessed it. Plantar flex, dorsiflex. Plantar flex, dorsiflex. And that on the ground, down towards the ground, hand has a job to do as well. That hand is going to try to hold that top leg, right leg down as it lifts towards the ceiling, plantar flexing and dorsiflexing. And then there's one more element, outstretched arm, right arm. Bringing that arm up so that bicep moves towards your ear. And when you plantar flex, dorsiflex, perhaps you feel a connection, not only in the leg, the thigh, the hip, perhaps even in the armpit, arm of that outstretched arm, bicep reaching for the ear. Couple more flexions here. And then first transition is to bring that leg back in, bring the arm all the way over, and we'll do the other side. So I'm just going to reposition myself slightly here. You can just roll right over onto the other side. I'm going to roll this way and take that top leg, left leg out straight away. And then the bottom hand, right hand is going to try to hold that thigh down as it lifts towards the ceiling. Plantar flexing, dorsiflexing, opening your torso, extending your arm. And now that extended arm, left arm, bicep moving towards your ear. Noticing internally, as you flex that foot, what other internal connections are there? Ankle moves for sure. Up the kinetic chain, how far does that go? Open to the possibility. It may even extend across your chest, into your armpit, into that reaching out arm. First transition is just bringing that top leg, left leg in, rolling back all the way over, and then coming onto your back for final resting pose. You can either have knees bent or legs straight out along the floor. So that was a lot of instruction. A lot of trying to make connections. Letting all of that effort fade away. Letting the ground support your body. Body taking the back seat. Earth taking the steering wheel. Perhaps you've already noticed to the degree you've been able to let the ground support your body. Maybe has left a signature on your breathing. Couple more breaths here. And the eyes are closed. Slowly, gradually opening your eyes. And then first transition as if knees are not already bent, bending your knees. And then rolling to one side, coming up seated. Just wait for everyone to come seated. Waiting for just a moment. So quite a extensive emphasis on movement of the ankles, perhaps established a connection, movement of other parts of that same kinetic chain. And who's to say, as you go through your day, maybe a little bit more spring in your step. Let's take a collective inhale. Exhale, hands to heart. Namaste. Thank you for practicing with me.